Sorry about that. How's it going?
No, it's no problem. Thanks.
Good to see you.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for willing to do this.
Yeah, of course. Really appreciate it.
I was surprised to see that you hadn't done an interview uh like since Genshin came out.
Yeah, yeah. There's only been, and it's funny, you reached out around the same time a couple other folks did. So, um, got a couple this week
Okay,
even. Yeah,
that's cool.
yeah.
So I can just start from the beginning and kind of go in chronological order. But what was your goal always to pursue acting in some way?
It was at an early age. I got started doing theater, and once I kind of fell in love with that, I was pretty sure I wanted to. And then in college, I wasn't sure if I wanted to study it. So I actually studied some journalism. I have a major in journalism and a theater minor. Um, but it was during um, college that I was like, I just kind of missed it. I missed performing on stage in the summers, which is when I had done it previously mostly. And so I started pursuing it again. And I knew it was either New York or LA I was going to move to after I graduated. And LA it was.
Mhm. And when did you make the move to LA? Like what year?
It was 2011, so 10
Okay.
years ago. Yeah.
And how did you get into SAG?
Um, you know, there's, gosh, I think the very first SAG project I did would have been, my gosh, I can't, you know what? Actually, the first SAG contract that I worked on was for a recording of Frozen because I was in Frozen live at the Hyperion, not Frozen the movie, but the stage version
Right.
that we did at California Adventure. That was the first SAG project I did, and I've done a few since. But yeah, that first one was 2015. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, because the first credit according to IMDb was Monster High, so I wasn't sure if that was first or not.
Oh no, actually, and that was a non-union gig.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, but that was my first voiceover gig for sure. Um, Monster High, and shortly after, then Ever After High. But yeah, those were amazing little projects that were my first step. I felt like such a noob then. I still feel like a noob, but I really felt like a noob then, and learned so much during the recordings of those.
Did you take to voice acting in general easily, or was it difficult at all for you at first?
My favorite part of voice acting, and really maybe my favorite part of acting, is just like I've always loved I've always loved impressions.
Yeah.
So that works for that really works for voiceover and just kind of manipulating your voice in certain ways. But I love intention
Mhm.
in text and in acting, and it's voiceover is very fun because all you've got are the words. All you've got are your voice and your words. And I grew up on stage where you had your words, and when your words aren't enough you could sing, and when you couldn't sing anymore you could dance. But
Mhm.
this is like you have to show it all in sort of one medium, from your own standpoint before it gets melded with another brilliant medium. Um, so I think that I definitely, and I'm still learning. I had a learning curve back then, but I always knew it was something that I could do for sure. Yeah.
And with those characters in Monster and Ever After High, who do you think you can relate to the most?
Oh gosh. Well, I think I think the voice for Sparky or Victor Frankenstein is probably the closest related to the inner workings of Josey as a child.
Oh,
Just because he was just like wacky and zany, and it was so fun to say things like, "I have created life," just absolutely ridiculous stuff. So I think I really relate to Sparky.
and then you had an on-camera project with Hot Wheels.
Yeah, yeah, man, that was a blast. That was through. Hot Wheels was is Mattel
Right.
product, and so it's actually through the same peeps or similar people as Monster High and Ever After High. So that was a gig that I think they knew I was a nerd already a little
Oh,
bit from voiceover stuff. So they were like, "Hey, can you send us an audition of you talking about science, something in science for like 60 seconds?" So I sent them like a 45-second video of like an explanation about photosynthesis,
mm,
and they were like, "Okay, yeah, no, this will work." Um, so yeah, that was very fun. We would like record 2 episodes of that in a day, and like over a weekend we'd shoot, four little episodes, maybe five. That's basically, I kind of describe it, if you're familiar with Bill Nye, it's sort of the Bill Nye of Hot Wheels.
yeah.
He's like explaining scientific principles with Hot Wheels cars, which is right up my alley.
Yeah. And do you have a preference of do you prefer voiceover over on camera?
Gosh, I don't know. I literally just came from a show, and we had a little extra photo call there at the end. But I came from a theater show where it's very melodramatic. It's a family show, and it's very like hilarious and like big and wacky. And I play a root beer bandit who's come to town to steal root beer.
Ugh,
So like as much as I enjoy voiceover, and obviously, I mean, it's been most of the work for actors in the last 2 years. There's also just like there's nothing that really beats the feeling of a live audience and being able to hear the laughter that you're making just from making a face, just from changing your eyebrows or doing something, and like that's a pretty fun feeling. But
mm,
I also love being in the booth. So, put me in front of people, put me by myself, whatever, it's fun.
and before getting to Genshin, I did want to first bring up Kaie and Neo. I would think that playing a character like that would have been somewhat difficult.
Yeah, it was very fun. I mean, I remember even getting the audition and them saying like, this guy doesn't talk, but he has to sometimes. So we need a voice. Didn't say that, but basically kind of discovering what that might sound like, especially for somebody who I talk a lot. So trying to get into the head and into the voice of somebody who doesn't speak as much. I kind of had to look for sort of examples or connections, or I actually, the closest thing, and it's not exactly this, but I sort of connected it to a show called Criminal Minds. I don't know if you're familiar. It was on CBS for a while, but even like the graphic of Kaie sort of reminded me of Dr. Reed, who has like this incredible mind, and so I sort of like tried to approach it in and it almost picturing Dr. Reed in a way. So I wasn't doing an impression, but I was giving a little nod,
Mhm.
maybe, to some of those lines.
And was there anything that you could relate to him at all?
Oh, with Kaie, yeah. I mean, I tell you, the biggest thing I can relate to is it's just really easy to text, right? And so most of his dialogue, most of his speaking, rather, comes from text. And I know I've got a friend, I think we all have a friend who, when you text them, they'll like call you in response. This guy, I've got a friend who, and he knows this, I call him out on it, but he will FaceTime you after you text him. And that's just like a step farther. You're like, no, I did an audio text from my phone. Like, I can't talk to you right. So I can relate. And sometimes it's just easier to text.
Mhm. And how'd you get involved with Fire Emblem?
With Fire Emblem, that was another audition during the pandemic. A lot of times you'll get a little part of a script with some sample lines or some direct lines that they've written for the character already. And then if you're lucky, I don't know, in my case, I like to have a bit of a visual. You'll get a photo of the character or some kind of design or or maybe characters from other things that they're thinking about to sort of mix them together. And that one, they had a clear idea for Rocher because I believe he was first a part of the series like maybe 11 or 12 years ago, or maybe even longer. But he's never had a voice before. So happy to be the first person to give him an English voice. But yeah, and that was a very fun little project because I want to say that I recorded that like half a mile from my house here, from my home here in Burbank. So that was cool. Really easy drive.
And have you tried to get into anime dubbing as well, or?
You know, it's so funny. I feel like I've been so fortunate and been so lucky to be with my agency. Shout out to Dean Panero Talent Agency. They sort of found me through another, like a sister agency of theirs, and then sort of adopted me into their ranks. So I've been lucky to get so many, all of my auditions through them. And there have definitely been some dubbing things that come across, but mainly I try to focus on everything that they send me and everything, all of those auditions.
Right.
But I would absolutely be into to dubbing. The only dubbing I did was another credit that you might have seen, Cold Feet.
Yep.
It was like you're not dubbing with a dialect because it was animal speak. So you sort of just like made little noises. Like I played a turtle and I played a little penguin. And you just sort of, I was able to watch the work that was already created, the animation that was already created, and bring life to it in that way. So even though I wasn't speaking, that was very fun because, like I said, I love intention. So having that extra task of like finding that intention, not in words, but just in sounds, was a pretty thrilling experience. Yeah.
So that's probably an obvious question, but is that the case where you've had to alter your voice the most so far for a voice role?
Yeah, probably so. I would say so. There's nothing that's been like too, although I think you're right. But Ever After High, I remember I recorded it, and then it was probably came out about 8 months later on Netflix, straight to Netflix. And there was no Red Knight. There was no Chase Redford for a long time. And I was realizing like, oh, it's a 4-part series. He comes in later, etc. But I do remember at the end of the first of the 4-part series, you see the Red Knight and you're like introduced to him. And then he like says something, you're like, and he's like, come with me or something like that. And I was like, oh no, did they recast it? Did they cut me? But they're setting you up to think that he was a scary character, and then he takes his mask off and you hear my voice. But that was a nice little like, oh God, what happened?
Right.
Did they alter my voice? Please tell me they altered my voice. Luckily they altered my voice.
So what is your personal story of getting involved with Genshin and becoming Kaeya and all that?
Yeah, gosh, this was pre-pandemic, during another stressful time in my life when my son was born almost 4 months early. He was a micro preemie. Yeah. So he was in the hospital for 4.5 months. I'm looking at him right now. He's over there playing with his mom and throwing shoes around and stuff, but it was an audition that I got like in my trips to and from the hospital and to and from a show that I was doing at the time. On top of Frozen that I was also doing at Disney. Yeah, I feel like that audition was probably 7 months before the pandemic happened. And then about 4 months after, they were like, hey, you've got a directed callback for this project. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. Really cool. Also very close to my house. Sweet. Exactly. So exciting. So I was like, okay. And then I like looked back through my emails, looked back through my files, and I found the script that they had sent, but I couldn't find my Kaeya, like the voice that I had done for it specifically, because I wanted to like kind of reinvigorate myself with it. And I realized that I I didn't have it because I had recorded at my agency and I was at that time when I was like, I was new at my agency and I wanted to make sure, like, I wanted to know how they liked to work. I wanted them to know how I liked to work, trying to get to know each other. And so they had sent the file for me. So I was like, oh, dang. But then they like immediately followed up, like when I was looking for it. And they were like, oh, and by the way, here was your audition. Kind of go for something like this, but then they'll direct you. So I went in and, not really knowing if it was it felt like a booking, getting a call back for anything really is amazing. But it felt like a booking. But you still like I wasn't sure. So I was like trying to figure it out. And Chris, our director, was there at the directed callback and was walking me through stuff. And I've heard he actually has a pretty good Kaeya impression. So speaking of being recast, I gotta watch out for that guy. But yeah, he kind of walked me through it and we fine-tuned what they liked about it. And he was like, cool, yeah. And that was that became like my first session as well, my first session with it. And then I believe it was the next session when they had some video, some like early gameplay that wasn't fully fledged out that I would watch and sort of say a few of the lines along with during the temple scene and things like that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, and it's crazy because I've just started streaming it now about 3 weeks ago, and sort of playing it fully for the first time and revisiting some of that, hearing those dialogue that it's somewhere trapped in the back of my brain anyway, but hearing it again is cool and also very cool because like I knew that it was a very cool project. I knew it was going to be popular. I didn't know how popular. I'm not sure anybody knew how popular. Maybe they did. Maybe MiHoYo knew. Yeah. But we knew that it was cool. We knew it was a really cool thing. And it was almost when it came out that I had a session and I had seen on the monitor in the studio, it had somebody else's name at the top as well with her script, and it said Jen Losey. And I was like, hey, were you guys working with Jen Losey? And Chris is like, oh yeah, she's in the game too. So then it's been fun to like find out slowly but surely who was in the game with me. I've friends that I've known Jen for like 7-8 years. We've done theater together in LA, and we sang a few duets together in a musical back in 2014, and then slowly but surely, like finding when people, when new banners come out and everything, the new people that get added to the cast. Mark Whitten and I did one of my favorite musicals ever together 7 years ago. So it's just like people that I've known from these various Sarah Miller Cruz, who does the voice of Lumine. We did just some like background silly footage for a musical that our friends were casting, and so it's been very fun to find those old friends and to make some new friends. We've had a couple picnics and stuff together as a cast, and it's been fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, outside of Christian on Tuesday, I did Dina Sherman on Monday.
Oh, nice. Oh man, they're both so great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you very close with Sean at all? Because I did him a while ago too.
No, I've actually never met Sean.
Okay.
Yeah, I wish. I hope to soon. And hopefully, when the world is back to a little more normalcy, maybe we'll see each other at conventions and stuff too. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
especially with the relationship that D-Luke and
I know. I have a few times rated his channel with my stream on Twitch. So sometimes I'm like, oh, cool, Sean's playing. We don't know each other, but send him some Kaeya love. Give him the Ice Boy love.
And as initially, as the role progressed, was there a default line that you had to kind of just get into character with him?
That's a great question. That is exactly the technique that I do use for like dialects, really specifically. Mm-hmm. Luckily, our amazing engineers have like sort of a few set lines that the company has and the director have said, like, yeah, these are the Kaeya set lines. When we need to come back to something or he needs refresh, like, let's go back to these. So like before each session, even they'll play a few lines. And I think it's a mix. Some are from the earlier days, some are from the later, and just kind of finding that balance and getting back into that world. But I would have to say that, like, especially because I've said it so often, so many requests while I'm doing signings and stuff for what's wrong? Can't handle the cold. It's a quick one to kind of get into. It kind of gets you into it.
And what can you personally relate to him the most?
Oh man, well, I love the style of support Kaeya gives. It's like, he's very kind, and he will let you know when you've done a good job, but also he's just like a little bit sassy, just eat. And sometimes it's playful, and then sometimes it's D-Luke, and it's a little more than playful. And it's a little like knife to the chest, little jabs, but I kind of love the sass. I think I relate to that. My friends would probably agree.
Okay. I had some questions from the Kaeya main subreddit.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Well, I kind of can guess the answer, but do you think Kaeya could sing?
Well, I think TikTok showed me that Kaeya could sing.
Yeah.
Somebody, gosh, I can't remember their name right off the top of my head, but they created the sound from Adventure Time, slowed down the song just a little bit. And honestly, the first time I heard it, I was like, what? Kaeya doesn't say those. I didn't say those lines as Kaeya. Where they pull this from? And honestly, I had never heard the song before. But now that I have heard the song, it's a dope little beat. It's a nice little tune. So it gets stuck in your head. But yeah, just this morning, I posted my my cover of the song itself too. I didn't give it exactly the full Kaeya voice, but the flavor's there.
Oh yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I did see that too. Well, not. I did see like you lip syncing to it before. And
yeah.
I figured once the actual cover dropped, it would like break TikTok.
Yeah, there have been plenty of people. Oh my gosh, the TikTok comments are just hilarious. They make me laugh.
That is one question that someone had too, was did the immediate fan base response surprise you?
Yeah, I think even my first tweet that I sent out about the game, like, I don't know, Twitter, I still feel brand new to Twitter as well. I'm learning. I'm finally adapting. I've been such a Facebook user, mainly for just friends and family back home in Kentucky. And then Instagram has kind of been my way, right? And but yeah, I hopped on Twitter, and even like I didn't know how to announce. I didn't know how to say, like, yeah, I'm happy to be a part of this, So I was like, cool, like, play this game. I'm on here. And I think that there was me not realizing like how many people were going to love Kaeya, or I guess from the beta already loved Kaeya. I guess slowly but surely I started to realize, like, oh, I know this fan base is amazing, but like, yeah, they like Kaeya. They're big fans. They're big fans.
And in terms of differences between you and him, like has any recording process been difficult for you because of that?
There are definitely times, and I always go back to thanking Chris for being our fearless leader. Sometimes you'll get into a certain headspace of like, think of Kaeya saying things in a certain way, but then you're like, oh, and he'll be like, well, think about it more like this, a little more musical, almost musical. And so he sort of works on those levels and dynamics, I think is probably a good way to put it. We really find those, he helps me rediscover those dynamics with Kaeya. Because, you can just be sultry the whole time if you really want, and that's all you can do. But Kaeya's a little more than that, So, yeah. And of course, I don't have an eye patch.
Right. Right. I know there was some recent questions related to that. Like, do you know what's under his eye patch?
I made the joke once that it's just another eye patch.
Mm-hmm.
So he pulls his eye patch off, another eye patch. Was it the Russian doll? You know, it just gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller.
Right. Somebody asked what your first impression of him was in terms of like physical appearance and his lore and everything.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'll start by saying I loved the eye patch to start. I'm a big Sea of Thieves player. I haven't played in several months, but so anything that's even closely related to a pirate is great. So even just a flavor of like, oh yeah, this might be a pirate thing. Oh, sweet. I definitely related to that, being able to compliment someone, but also like joke with them.
Mm-hmm.
I was able to, you can kind of see that expression. There's almost a smirk that he has a resting smirk face,
Yeah.
if you will. Yeah.
What did your impression of him change over time as like throughout his arc so far?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, especially in that first session where like everything we did was basically that first scene and a couple small things here and out, here throughout. And I knew I knew a little bit of where his arc was going to go, just from the production team, from the direction. But in the beginning, he seemed a lot more like closed off, a lot more mysterious. And I'm glad that, you know, while still mysterious, he like plays through some of that mystery and you get a little bit of his story here and there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And in terms of physicality, are you the kind of person that's always doing that in the booth as well with actions and?
Definitely. And it's funny, you know, with Kaeya, you try to like add in those motions and expressions, physical expressions, but also try to temper your voice to not like match it exactly. Because, you know, he's cool as well, you know, so some things just may be a little easier, though there's still those efforts, those attacks that are very fun. And I try to think like, okay, yeah, a sword. I've never personally, well, I guess I have like a toy sword, but not a real sword. So I try to put a little extra effort into it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the booth for sure.
And several people asked if there were other main characters that you auditioned for, and who would you like to play if you weren't Kaeya?
Gosh, you know, I didn't audition for any other main characters. Think there's some random NPC in Teyvat that has my voice, but it's very like, it's very not Kaeya like, and it was in a big Sea of Thieves phase. So I was like, can I go like almost pirate? They were like, yeah, sure, let's see. So I just threw in like, I didn't say yar or anything like that, but you know, he talked down like this right here, you know, something like that. But I don't even remember who that was or where we might find him.
Okay. And has there been any darker headspace you've had to get into for him, or has it mostly been alluring and mysterious?
Yeah, so far it's just kind of been mysterious, you know, and just getting into that, trying to, you know, discover that relationship with characters like D-Luke, and it just, they're not dark headspaces, but you try to think of their shared experiences, I guess. Mm-hmm. So, and the differences between the two and what made them different. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's a dark headspace.
Right.
Yeah, but a deep one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you kind of already answered it, but some other people asked, who are you closest to in terms of other people that play main characters?
Okay. Gosh. I mean, sometimes I can match Barbara's energy. Sometimes, you know, go Barbara, go. I don't know. And I'm so like, I think I have like 5 characters on my campaign right now myself. So I'm not too deep in, but I do love to hear Kelly Baskin's voice. We became pals at the Genshin Wait, she's from Tennessee. I'm from Kentucky. So it was like, oh, cool. Great. What's up? How's it going?
I was going to ask this early on, but were you or are you a fan of anime?
I am. You know, I was actually I got so excited this morning. Like, I just remembered that Cowboy Bebop, having a live
Right.
action. Um, because I'm pretty sure Cowboy Bebop's may be available first season on Netflix now.
Mhm.
So I saw that and was like, oh, I got to rewatch. I also, on my list of things to rewatch, is Trigun. Um, I'm looking at the DVD collection over there. So love that. And I've always been a Pokemon nerd, both from Game Boy games to collecting the cards in the 90s, the base set, like the base set,
Yeah.
Jungle, Fossil. Um, yeah, I was a big fan of Pokemon Blue and Pokemon Yellow myself. And I just started watching Neon Genesis Evangelion as
Okay.
well.
Yeah.
So I'm like an episode and a half in. I paused it last night. I was like, I must sleep, but I must come back.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't even really know if you could answer, but somebody said like cryo Kaeya or physical Kaeya. You know.
Oh gosh, great question. That one's a tough one. I need to be more experienced with the gameplay, but I do love when I'm like on stream. I guess physical and this is very random, but like I'll be on stream, somebody asks a question and I'll be like answering that question, and then all of a sudden I'll just like hear my own voice saying, we're not frozen in time after all. And like the first time I heard it, I was like, what? Was that an echo? Do I have my volume up on my Chrome? What's going on? And I was like, oh, right, the game. Cool. So that's, yeah. Fun little nugget.
Yeah. Another one is just if you have any particular advice for people who want to get into voice acting in general.
I know I grew up, like I said, doing impressions. So I would do impressions of Saturday Night Live impressions. So I would be doing impressions of impressions in a way, but just having fun, exploring your voice, seeing how you can manipulate it, and finding how your specific voice fits into the world as well. Because you got animation, you've got commercial voiceover work, you've got dubbing, you've got audiobooks. There's so many avenues. My sister's been working a lot actually in the audiobook world lately. And there's so much you can do. I mean, there's so much you can do in the whole world, but even in the voiceover world, there's so much you can do. Even learning about loop groups and some of the background audio that you'll hear. That's some work that like it may seem tedious, or you're not doing it for the movie, but you could get together with friends and like create loop group stuff, and kind of just discover things yourself. I would say just exploring. I am absolutely still discovering things, and I'm still learning things, whether it be about my voice or whether it be about my tech and things with my computer, things with my engineering and mixing and things like that. So I would say if you have those tools, if you got a computer with GarageBand or something like that, play with it. Just toy with it, because the more the more you can help yourself. And if you start teaching yourself now, you'll know more than I do at this point in my life, probably.
And this is just something I came up with. Is there something that you learned the most growing up in Kentucky and brought with you into your like moving and pursuing acting that like helped you the most?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like I grew up in a tiny town, population 550-ish. So I was like the kid who, like, when the theater troupe came to town and they did like an assembly at school, and they were like, would anybody like to come up on stage? Like before they even finished that sentence, like everybody's pointing at me, you know, they're like, Josey wants to do that. Josey. Even if I was like, no, kind of not right now, I just want to watch. So I was always like known to be that kid. And I think more than anything, because of that, is I've taken the support with me. Because later in life it became like, not only is he that kid, but they realized that I could do it, you know, that I could do this for a career and I could do this for a living. And so the continued support, even if it's just on Facebook, on Instagram, whatever it may be, you know, I feel like I try to take some of that with me. I know I would love to be able to bring something back to them as well. You know, it's living in Eastern Kentucky wouldn't be the easiest thing for my career right now. Being in LA is a little easier. But in some way, whether it's, even if it's not physically being there, I would love to be able to bring something back, and be able to, you know, teach something, which is kind of from the last question, like teaching people things that I wish I knew at their age, you know, and giving them the support that I feel like they've shown me, whether it's, you know, neighbors from back home or cousins from Lexington, Louisville, and cousins from Ohio and all this. You know, I think I take their support with me. Yeah. Most.
And one of my final questions for every interview I do is asking, what do you want your legacy to be?
Oh man, also a good question. I not necessarily my legacy. I feel like my dream, like I could die happy if I had a Star Wars action figure with my likeness.
Okay.
So there's that. And re-ask your question so that I can make sure I'm answering this right. So you ask it again.
Oh, what do you want your legacy to be?
Legacy, right. I knew there was a certain term. Yeah. So that's like, that wouldn't be my legacy. That's like a dream. That's a goal. Right. I think there's something very fun about, and I have not reached this point yet in my career by any means, but I think there's something very fun about, like, you know, and maybe this goes back to my love of impressions, but being able to like hear a kid do an impression of a character that I've voiced, you know. I mean, there was a kid, if you've seen on Twitter, who created a little drawing of Kaeya, and then he knows like almost all of Kaeya's lines. It's so adorable. So I retweeted that last week. But that kind of just like, and not even necessarily to know that it's me, you know, but just to know that you have that effect, that somebody like cares enough about the way you've said something that they want to say it like you or sound like you. You know, I would love for my son to be able to be able to hear somebody like say, like, for example, like an epic line from like Mortal Kombat, which I'm not a part of, but like something like, you know, get over here, you know. So if you hear that and you're like, oh, that's from Mortal Kombat, and that's like blah 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 blah. I would love for my son to eventually one day hear something and be like, oh, nice, my dad was the voice of that character, you know. You know, something fun like that.
And I can imagine that you've gotten a lot of messages from people about Kaeya specifically, like how he's helped them in some way.
It's true, and that's something that, like, you know, not being on a project before of this scale, there might be one person that reaches out, or just fewer people that reach out about Monster High and about this and about that. But like something the scale of Genshin, because there are so many people's eyes and ears on it, it does affect more people, and more of them do reach out. And that was something that, you know, like I said, I knew the fan base was supportive, but I didn't realize how much these characters would mean to them, you know. And I guess it's silly of me, but that's been beautiful to see. And that, you know, there are even people who are like, I listen to the English voices because of Kaeya, and I love the way that you say this and that. And that's touching. You know, that's very sweet, very kind. Anxiety, or if it's, you know, just like they want to get in that headspace of with Kaeya, you know, whatever that may be. I'm glad that I'm there for it.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything upcoming that you can talk about that you're a part of, or?
Gosh, I'm still waiting on a couple projects to be official. But I will be very excited to talk about those, but I can't yet.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. Is there anything that you want to say to the Kaeya subreddit?
Thank you. My gosh. I'm glad that there's so many Kaeya fans out there. And I think that even if I weren't a part of it, I would like Kaeya too. Articuno was always my favorite Pokemon, especially legendary. So I think I would totally be into the Ice Boy for sure.
Thanks. I'm glad that we got to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.